Hello, everyone. If you're paying any sort of attention in the hunting and shooting world, you're aware of silencers, suppressors, muzzle control noise devices, and really that's what they initially were, invented way back when they invented the automobile muffler. Same gentleman invented both. But there's always been this sort of nefarious business with James Bond and quiet, and they're on a government restricted list for firearms. And what is going on with this silencer business? We have someone here with answers. This man knows all about it. He has set up business that simplifies the government red tape in purchasing silencers or suppressors. So we are going to today be joined by Brandon Maddox of Silencer Central, who's going to answer all of our questions and maybe clear up some of this messy red tape. Brandon, thank you for joining us on Ron Spomer Outdoors Podcast. We are really looking forward to finding out what you can tell us about simplifying the purchase and ownership of a silencer. Welcome.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. Looking forward to it.
Well, I appreciate you being here and helping answer some of these questions. Could you just, for a starter, tell us why silencers are on this restricted firearms list and why we have to have some kind of a license to own one?
Yeah, good question. So, sometimes I'm fortunate enough to have dinner with like legal scholars to kind of understand the history of it. And the way they explain it to me is that in 1934 is when they created the NFA process, the National Firearms Act process, which is the process to buy a machine gun, short barrel rifle, destructive device, and a silencer. And this was right after Prohibition. So people were excited to get their ability to buy alcohol now without, any type of prescription or paperwork. And it was proposed originally that handguns go into the NFA process with machine guns. So the government wanted to regulate machine guns. So they created a $200 tax, which was 100% tax on a machine gun. So a machine gun in 1934 was $200. And they wanted the federal government wanted to put handguns into the same process with machine guns. But Americans were like, nope, you already took away alcohol from us. We just did get it back. You're not taking away our handguns. So I suspect something happened where someone said, well, let's put silencers in there. No one buys or uses these things anyway. And my assumption, like most things in life, there was no one at the table. There was an advocate for suppressors or silencers that said, hey, time out. These aren't a public safety issue. What are you doing? So because there was no one at the table, it got switched out for handguns to suppressors. And now silencers are regulated the same way as a machine gun. And probably one of the only countries in the world that has this high regulations on sound suppressors.
Huh. Yeah, I have heard that there are many, if not most, European countries, which we usually think of as being pretty restrictive on firearm ownership, and yet you can just walk in and buy a silencer, get it with your gun anytime. Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, that's been my experience traveling. I used to have a daughter that did Irish dance, so we were all over, parts of Europe for her to dance, and they... I guess the qualification they would say is it's almost impossible to get a firearm, but if you're fortunate enough to be able to buy a firearm, it's pretty easy to get a suppressor. So I almost think of it as a flip-flop of what you have here, kind of. It's fairly easy compared to what they have. Like even in Africa, you can only get one rifle per caliber. So if you own a 300 Win Mag, that's the only 300 Win Mag you're going to own unless you get rid of the other one somehow.
Yeah, probably won't let you have a 30-06 or a 308 if you have a 300, one caliber. That's always struck me as pretty odd that a simple device that's a can, essentially, that reduces the sound blast. You'd think people would welcome that. It's like, yeah, we're going to quiet things down in the woods at the target range and everything else, protect people's hearings, not bother the neighbors. Why not? Well, but what about this misconception that a silencer is really a silencer? I mean, in other words, you can shoot somebody, be a criminal, and nobody will know you've fired a gun. That's not realistic.
Yeah, no, I think that, Hollywood hasn't done us any favors with depicting it in, movies that it is super quiet. And then I think people just assume it's an assassin tool and that it's, a public safety issue and that people could get shot. Nobody would know where it's coming from. It just, if you look, there's probably 4 million silencers in circulation in the U.S. that have been legally obtained. and there's rarely ever a crime committed with a suppressor. So it's not really a public safety issue, even though most uneducated people who hear the word silencer, they just assume the worst.
Yeah, that's certainly true. And really, you think about it, it's just the opposite. It makes it more difficult to conceal a firearm that has 5 to 8 inch big can on the end of the barrel. Oh, yeah, crazy. And then, of course, you're knocking out what? You knock 25 to maybe 30 decibels of sound off the top. Is that about it?
Yeah, exactly. So you're still hearing the shot. It's typically low enough where you don't have to wear earplugs, and it's typically for a hunting application, the benefit is the animal can't tell where the shot came from. They'll hear the noise, but they're kind of looking around because they don't hear one loud percussion. It kind of spreads out over a little bit more time.
Yeah. Well, I think most people have a pretty good idea of what a suppressor can do for quieting things down and all, but I don't think we know how to get one. What about this government red tape? What can you tell us about that? How do we buy a silencer without that?
Yeah, good question. So, the best analogy that I've come up with over the years is that buying a suppressor is somewhat analogous to buying a vehicle in that it's a title transfer. So if you go buy a truck locally, typically the state is going to require that dealer to transfer that title of ownership to you, and it has to go through the state process, and the state has to retitle it, and the state will typically charge some kind of tax. So a silencer is very analogous. So, silencer would be in our inventory at Silencer Central. We're licensed in 42 states, so we can sell in all 42 states that they're legal in. And they're licensed to our EIN number, which is essentially our tax number for our LLC. So the ATF has them licensed to us. So when a customer wants to buy a suppressor, in simplest terms, we're asking the ATF to transfer the title of ownership from us, the dealer, to either them as an individual or to them in a trust that we would create for them, or they could provide their own trust. And the feds charge a $200 tax, people call it a tax stamp, to do that transfer. But essentially, the feds are changing the title ownership. They're doing a background check, same firearms background check you would do when you buy a regular firearm. And as long as you can legally own and possess a firearm, you can own a silencer based on the background check. So again, in simple terms, it's paperwork to do a title transfer. What's interesting is, if you think about it, in 1934, there was no national federal database to pull up and see if you were a felon. So years ago, when I first started, you had to go to your local sheriff, and they had the sign saying basically you weren't a felon. Now the ATF does the background check for you, and we send blank fingerprint cards to our customers. We give them ink where they roll their own fingerprints. They send them to us. The secret on that is that ATF doesn't really use those fingerprint cards because the statute says you have to submit fingerprint cards kind of to determine your identity and make sure you aren't a felon. But the feds still do the background check just the same way they would if you walked in to buy a firearm. They use the information you provide us to do the background check. They said they rarely ever use the fingerprints unless there's true, a John William Smith identity issue and same state, same area. One's a felon, one's not. Let's make sure these don't match the one that was, a felon. But yeah, in simplest terms, it's just a title transfer. I think that what's intimidated people in the past is just the length it used to take. It used to take, it's been a bell-shaped curve. Silencer Central, I've been doing this about 20 years, started in 2005. And when I first started, oddly enough, in the mid-2000s, it was about a 2-week process because no one was buying them. And then I saw it, gradually over time get higher. The highest point was during the Obama administration. He made some changes to the application in regards to a trust. I saw it get up to a year and a half, and then I saw it kind of come down and maybe stabilize at about 9 months. And then in March of this year, in 2024, ATF made some changes in their processes. And once they changed their processes, oddly enough, we're now getting approvals real time. So about 79% of the applications they review, they will approve them typically same day or within a few days.
Wow, that's a huge change.
This is
that's what's always stopped me.
Yeah. This is probably not a great analogy, but I always say, if God himself came down and said, Brandon, I can make the approval time whatever you want. I would say, God, I would be happy with 30 days. But to have real time, who would have ever thought that would even be an option? But, basically they're doing a background check. And if you've never been arrested before and you don't have the same name as a felon in your state, which is going to be, they're saying 79% of the time, you're going to get approved in a couple days because they send the background checks as soon as they get them in. Whatever fingerprint cards we submit to them and digital information we submit to them, all the dealers in the country, at the end of the day, they send them to the FBI, and then the FBI does a digital background check, and 79% of them are going to come back, instant approval. So then that's what pushes them right through the system.
Huh. So, but you guys are doing all that paperwork stuff. So someone like me who just hates red tape paperwork, you guys kind of handle that. You give us the forms and everything we need to do, simplify it.
Yeah. So I would say that, I kind of backed into this. I mean, I started shooting prairie dogs, and I know you're familiar with South Dakota, but I started shooting prairie dogs and decided to shoot more prairie dogs. I probably needed something to quiet down the rifle a little bit. And that's how I got into suppressors. But, I realized that having my license was kind of expensive. So I figured I better sell a few to, pay for the license. The wife's going to ride me. Why are we spending, $1,500 a year or whatever to keep this license up just so you can have toys to play with? So I had to sell a few. And what I found was it was beneficial for me because I worked gun shows, sportsman shows, farm shows, still do. So to get that customer interaction face-to-face, sort of market research real time, if you will, I found that, there was a lot of obstacles out there with people like you're saying about the red tape. So what we did is we worked with the ATF to find ways to do everything very digital. So it was very popular during COVID, which then really helped it take off even quicker. We could do 100% of the paperwork digitally. So it's almost, think of it as like DocuSign. So I could send you all the paperwork digitally, a couple signatures, and then you just upload a photo. We'll send you fingerprint cards. We get your fingerprints done and get them scanned in our system and on file. And we have a digital process that submits this all to the ATF eForms website. So, most people are familiar with DocuSign these days. When they buy a vehicle or home or something to do the closing, they just sign digital paperwork. Yeah. So we've essentially made it that simple, and I think that's really helped. The other thing is people are always worried about how do I get my barrel threaded to put the silencer on there. A lot of things come with brakes now, or a lot of things are coming threaded, but some people may have rifles they've had for a while that don't have that. And so we got into threading barrels just to make it simpler. When the wait was like 10 months, we would tell people, hey, we let you pay while you wait. If you want to pay monthly for 10 months, that's fine. So, $100 a month or whatever you want to pay. We still do that, but it's not as, as critical because the approvals are going through so quickly. And then also one thing that's very unique to Silencer Central is we mail the approved silencer to your front door. So like where you live, say in Idaho, we have a location and a full-time employee in Idaho. So once the silencer is approved, the paperwork's done in Idaho by our employee there, and then he mails that silencer right to your front door there in Idaho. So it's a very smooth process where you're not having to go back and forth to the gun dealer to do paperwork or figure stuff out. We're just mailing it straight to your front door.
Brandon, $200 is your tax stamp to get one suppressor. Now, you can use that suppressor on any caliber smaller than its diameter. So if you buy a suppressor for a 308, you could shoot a 284 through it, anything smaller. But it's not quite as effective if you get too small because the air is going around the bullet and you're not really closing off as much to dampen the sound, right?
Good question. Sometimes it'll make up for it because you have more volume in there. So like if you look at a 30 cal silencer on a 223, so typically a 30 cal silencer might be, say 8-9 inches long, whereas a 223 would probably be 2 inches shorter. But by having the extra volume, sometimes it will negate itself out. So, but you're right. Typically, if you try to shoot, too small of a caliber through too big of a one, you do lose a little bit. So over the years, I've found that most people on their first one, they try to buy someone as universal as possible because then they feel like they're getting, good use for their money. So typically a person will buy, say, like a 30 cal suppressor. But then I find they like it better than they thought they would, and then they'll end up getting one specifically for a 223. And then it's easier to justify a third because you really liked the 223 when you end up getting a rimfire one. So it just kind of grows that way. But that's what I always say. The best one is really probably the 30. Well, typically what I say is what firearm do you shoot the most? Because that's the one you're going to get the most benefit from. Get one specifically for that.
Sure.
And then in most cases, you're going to have calibers less than that. So you can use it on other calibers. And, there's about 3.5 million silencers in circulation that have been legally obtained in the U.S., and there's about 1 million people own them. So I do find most people, once you buy one, you end up getting two more because you like them better than you thought you would.
Yeah. Well, I can understand that. All right, so let me back up for a bit here. I think I've got most of it figured out. You want to get a silencer. You it's sort of like buying a rifle. You get checked over, your instant background check stuff. You're clear. It gets done in a day. Go through your process. You do have the added fingerprint thing, but they're not keeping those fingerprints on. I mean, a lot of folks are going to say, I don't want the government having my fingerprints and all this. That's a gun registration, right?
Yeah, and I mean, technically, I guess the NFA process is a gun registry. They say they don't keep the fingerprints on file. They're just check it. Most of the time they don't use them. We keep them on file so that when you buy another one, you don't have to resubmit them.
Okay. But the government might or might not keep them on file, but that's not a gun. They don't know what guns you have. They just know what suppressors you have.
100% correct. You're right.
Yeah. Now, if I buy one suppressor, it's a $200 tax stamp. That's forever as long as I own it?
Yep, one-time fee per silencer, yep.
Okay. Now, if I want to get a second suppressor for that 22 you mentioned, that's another $200?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Okay. So every time you buy one, it's a $200 fee, but then you've got it forever. Put it on any rifle you want that it fits.
Yeah, totally. I guess
okay.
And I think people always ask why have they grown so quickly in popularity. I mean, I think of it, a lot of it's education, but the other thing is that $200 tax when I first started was, just due to inflation. It was a whole lot more back then than it is now.
Yeah. Obviously, what you mentioned at the start about 1934, $200 tax stamp on a silencer was the cost as much as a machine gun. So who's going to buy them, huh?
No, totally.
Yeah, makes sense. Do you routinely find that people who buy their first suppressor will come looking for a second or a third? Do most people just say, wow, this was really great?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, the first one I bought, I really knew nothing about it. And I even said at the time that, online, everything you read was kind of inaccurate. It was sort of just rumors or myths because there just wasn't that much volume out there. So no one really knew. But the first one I bought was steel and it was really too heavy. So then the second one I bought was smaller, but it was almost too small. It was too loud. So it wasn't until I got the third one that I got a titanium one that was super lightweight and quiet and was really what I was looking for and should have bought in the first place. But most people, typically it's kind of like scopes. I mean, I figure when scopes first came out, people are like, it's kind of expensive. I might just get one. But, once you get it sighted in, you're like, you know what? I believe I'll just get one for each gun. So that's kind of the way, in my mind, silencers have evolved where people are like, you know what? That works better than I thought. My daughter hunts with me. I probably had to get one for hers. I've got that 6.5 in the closet. I might need it quick at night. So let's get one for it. I don't know. It's life. You can find ways to justify it. Because I always say it will work better than you think. I mean, a lot of people now have friends that have them, so they've shot them and they have more familiarity with them. But when I used to sell them at gun shows and sportsman shows, most guys when they bought it were kind of buying it sight unseen because you couldn't really shoot it at the show to hear it. And then after they got it, 100% of the time, they're like, man, I wish I'd done this years ago. This is a game changer. Yeah,
it really is. I've shot, it's a good 20 years ago or maybe more when I shot my first. And I didn't get one because of the hassle, the $200 tax. And at the time, I thought you had to pay that every year. And that was like, no way I'm going to do that. But after everything you've explained now makes it kind of a slam dunk. Why not? Especially when you consider some scope mounting systems, just your bases and your rings, that'll run you $200. And we put those on pretty much every rifle. So, yeah. And then bipods and all the other things that we hang off of our rifles. Why not put a suppressor on and save your hearing?
Yeah, 100%. No, and people forget too, it helps with recoil, which is kind of a nice added benefit that gets a little bit of recoil reduction. It's the same as a brake would be, about 45%. So it's a positive.
Wow. Yeah, that pretty much leaves the only one as the length. You want to stick another 6-7 inches on the end of your barrel. What seems to be the solution for that?
Yeah, so, and sometimes people ask, like, the evolution of suppressors. If anything, I've seen them start getting shorter and fatter just because you can get the same volume in a shorter, configuration. So if you look at our Banish backcountry, it's 5.5 inches long. And by the time you screw that on there, you're going to have less than 5 inches to the end of the barrel. And it weighs like 7.8 ounces because it's 100% titanium. So it's super lightweight. And that thing's hearing safe on a 300 Remington Ultramax. So it's really powerful. It's got a lot of baffles in it. The goal has been, instead of getting long silencers, is how do you shorten them up and maybe make them a little bit fatter? Because traditionally, a 223 and a 30 cal silencer were, say, 1.5 inch diameter. I usually say it's somewhat equivalent to like a toilet tissue roll. But now you've seen them get a little bit bigger, 1.6 diameter, maybe even a 1.65, and just keep taking the inches off the length, which has helped, I think.
The biggest issue for me now that I've straightened out all this government red tape business and realized that I can afford one and it's not that big of a onerous task to get one is the look. I don't mind the unbalancing. They're so light now, like you said. I tried one last year on I think it was a 24-inch barrel, so it made it fairly long, but I was hunting open country, pronghorn style, so it really didn't matter if it was sticking up in the air more, but I sure appreciated when I came upon my animal and I had to make a quick shot, that I didn't have to go stuffing things in my ear or trying to find some shells and stuff to put on. I could just raise up and shoot and not blow my ears out. So that means a lot to me now that I'm older and I've lost most of my hearing by shooting without a suppressor or ear protection. So I can quite understand why folks would say that one worked well. I think I'll get another. Now, you mentioned earlier that you guys actually will thread an older barrel so that you can fit one. How does that work?
Yeah, good question. So we've gotten pretty good with just the whole mailing to your front door stuff. So what we'll do is we'll mail an empty gun case to your front door. You basically just put that rifle in there. Typically, we ask you to take the scope off, bipod, stuff like that, ship it to us. We thread it and ship it right back to you. So it's kind of a nice turnkey process.
That's pretty amazing. Golly, you just... Now, do you make all of these cans right there in the factory?
Good question. So Silencer Central is a dealer, so we can sell anything. So we sell everybody else's suppressors. In most cases, we're probably the biggest dealer for most manufacturers. We also have a brand that we had created for us. When I first started doing this years ago, there was nothing out there that we felt like was kind of hunting focused, lightweight, everything else was more tactical. So the brand that we have is Banish suppressors, and those we do have made. We have about 5 manufacturers. Typically, they're military contractors because it's very difficult to machine that titanium. And the military contractors are used to that with military weapons and, different aircraft type materials. So they're used to a sort of a higher level of, machining and sort of standards. And it's worked out really well to work with people that we know have to meet government, specs and requirements for their products. But we have like 5 different manufacturers pretty much all over the country, just geographically dispersed in case there's any issues that would mess it up. And, what's interesting is, people used to ask me, well, why did you end up kind of getting your own brand? And I said, well, our whole mission was how do we make the process simple? And the honest truth is I sold so many in January, February, and March at gun shows and sportsman shows. No one could supply enough to me at that time of the year to make my business viable. Like I could sell more than anyone could make for me. So that's when I started out white labeling. I would go to other manufacturers and say, hey, can you just put my name on it? And again, they couldn't keep up with us. So I'm not saying that the manufacturers couldn't stay caught up, but that was pretty much it. So we hired other manufacturers and then went to, I always say I'm a pharmacist by trade. So the design of these silencers were done by firearms experts that we hired that's their area of expertise. So and the Mack brothers and Sturgis, they both came from Dakota Arms. They make a lot of rifles and they were comfortable with titanium and they helped us with a lot of our first designs with suppressors. Now we have a full engineering team inside. We also outsource stuff to other big manufacturers that make suppressors, go to them and say, hey, we want something titanium. You can take apart to clean, and here's the decibels we need, and here's the weight, and here's the length. And, we'll pay them a nice royalty, and then sometimes they'll make them for us, and sometimes we pay them. But going back to the manufacturing, so right now I talked about like real-time approvals. So you can imagine the market's response when we went from 10 months to, like getting it approved in a few days. Really, most manufacturers don't have any silencers in inventory, but we do because, like I said, we have 5 different people that make for us. Every silencer we have made, we have 2 manufacturers make it, so we have 1 primary and 1 backup, and it makes it easier for us to scale up. It's not like we have a warehouse out here and we only have 200 machines. We've got 5 other companies that we're probably 10, 20% of their business, so we're not their major person, but when we go to them and say, hey, could you add another shift and double what you make for us? Like, yeah, we could do that. So that's allowed us to be able to scale up more quickly. So, our cap at one point was probably 150,000 silencers a year, which is probably the largest manufacturer in the country. Now we can double that. So this year we're at full tilt where we'll probably be able to make right around 300,000 silencers by leveraging that network of scaling it up. So it's it's been beneficial to us when people need supply and need to get suppressors over the last 20 years to have access to kind of your own designs, your own manufacturers. And then also, titanium's not cheap. It's got to be sourced overseas because there's really none that's available in North America. So, we're buying $8 to $10 million worth of titanium at a time, and we're able to get the price really aggressive because we buy so much.
Wow.
And then, of course, the customers benefit from that because we're probably able to buy titanium for what most, smaller companies, medium-sized companies could buy stainless in the U.S. So then it gives the benefit to the consumer of a lighter weight, stronger, suppressor. It's going to last longer for, a comparable price that you would see something that's stainless steel.
That is crazy. There's a lot more detail here than I ever dreamed of. I thought it was just like that can of soda you're drinking there and you put a hole in the end of it. Say, Brandon, what should an average shooter hunter then look for? It sounds like it's pretty simple to get the tax stamps and all that government red tape done. Now we've got to decide, how do I select a silencer? What do I look for in one for, say, target shooting versus hunting? Got any general rules for us to follow?
Yeah, good question. So I would guess a lot of your audience probably does both, right? Probably hunt and target shoot.
A bit, yeah.
Yeah, so I would say that, of course at Silencer Central we have a full call center full of people. That's all they do, shoot and hunt. And, it doesn't cost any more or any less to call and ask them what they think. Because if you tell them what you're trying to cover, they're going to help you figure out exactly. Working shows myself, I would say the number one seller typically is the Banish 30. It comes apart to clean, which, most shooters like because then you can clean it. The baffles are interchangeable. You can put them back in any order so you don't have to worry about too much wear on that first baffle. It's modular, so you can make it longer or shorter. You can shoot at 7 inches or 9. So a lot of people like that because that'll work both for hunting and target shooting. Typically, the Banish backcountry is pretty popular. Sometimes there's like a second one, almost dedicated just for hunting because it's really, really lightweight. We talked about earlier, it's 7.8 ounces, 5.5 inches long. So that backcountry is very popular. The goal is to think about which firearm do you typically shoot the most, and then getting a suppressor kind of set up for that one. And like I said, it's going to work better than you thought. And most people, the one they shoot the most is going to be a 30 cal caliber, even if it be a 6.5 or even arguably a 243, you can use that 30 cal suppressor on that and still be able to use it on a 223 if you wanted. The benefit of using, say, like a Banish 30 that comes apart to clean is if you had to, you could use it on rimfire as well because that lead will get in there, but you can take it apart and clean it out. So until you get a chance to get a 22 silencer. But the most popular one at almost every show we do, whether it be a sportsman show, even we work some ice fishing shows, almost everyone gets a 30 cal suppressor and then uses it on kind of everything they have that will work on. And then once they see how well it works, end up getting another one for, say, a handgun or even a rimfire rifle or handgun.
Now, it sounds like the 22 rimfire stuff is a little more specialized in what you need. You want to obviously keep it the size smaller, but it sounds like you've got some more fouling. Of course, 22 rimfires are pretty dirty cartridges, so you get fouled more easily. So you do want its ability to clean out both the carbon and the lead fouling.
Yeah, exactly. So, when I first started doing this, they didn't take them apart and clean them, which was a limitation. So now almost every rimfire suppressor on the market comes apart to clean. Of course, we're biased. We like titanium because titanium is strong, but also you get very aggressive with your cleaning materials. You can even put it in a tumbler in it and clean it and not have to worry about messing up the titanium baffles. So most people will, like the Banish 22 we have, take it apart, take the baffles out, let them soak in like CLR, that calcium lime rust remover. That acid will eat the carbon right off, and you don't have to worry. Like if you had aluminum baffles, that'd be a problem because most caustic solutions will eat up the materials. But the problem with using stainless steel in a 22 is it adds additional weight. The other benefit of titanium I didn't talk about too much is one of the benefits of suppressor obviously is making it quieter. Typically that titanium will wick the heat out of the blast a little bit better. And in some cases, like if you made a silencer 100% out of titanium and you compared it to one that's 100% out of stainless steel, typically the titanium will be quieter. They do get hotter quicker, but it is because they're wicking the heat out of the blast. And you could argue if you're shooting a 22 and you're hunting with it, you're not shooting that many rounds in a row, but there are some benefits from a sound perspective as well that titanium superior to stainless.
Now, what sort of prices are we seeing on these suppressors? I'm sure there's pretty wide variety, but give us a basic starter price, and then why is the higher priced model significantly more expensive if it is?
Yeah, good question. So, we have 122 that's like probably mostly aluminum, so it's going to be probably in that like say $399 range, and that's going to work probably fine for say like a Ruger 1022, Ruger Mark IV handgun pistol. Like I said, you got to be worried about cleaning it. You can't be as aggressive with the aluminum. You do worry about long-term benefits of aluminum. Then like there's an all titanium one. It's going to be around $550, and the benefit there is you can use 22 mag, you could use a 5.7, you could use a 17 HMR, so you could use even like a 22 Hornet. So you could use some hotter rounds in that titanium because that titanium's stronger. It can handle higher gas pressures, and then you still get the same benefits. Take it apart to clean. The baffles are all the same, so you can put them in any order you want. That's the rimfire. So really the benefit of paying for the more expensive one is you're still going to get the lightweight with the titanium. It's probably going to last longer. You can clean it more aggressively, and then also you can run hotter rounds and not have to worry about problems with that. Same with the 223. I mean, you could probably get say an AR setup for say $600-700 for a stainless steel one, and then probably $850 for a full titanium one, and the kind of similar benefits. The titanium's going to be lighter weight on the end. Sometimes people around ARs, they think they need to get something that's like stainless steel or something that's going to be able to handle. People have in their head that they're going to be using it like a full auto machine gun nonstop, and they want something that can handle belt fed. That's just not really the reality. Of course, I'm biased, but I would say why not get a 223 titanium silencer, because they're guaranteed forever. So if you do become Rambo and think you're going to shoot a belt fed and burn up the suppressor, then we're going to replace it for free anyway. So why not just have a light silencer on there the whole time? And then kind of the same concept with a 223 or with a 30 cal. So the 30 cal, you could go with a stainless steel one, probably be again maybe $700-800, and then you could step up and go to a titanium one. It's going to be maybe a couple $100 more, like a $900 to $1,000, and that brings up the question too. Like, I personally like direct thread silencers. I liked it to just thread right onto the barrel. It's sort of a cool factor or sort of trendy to get the adapters and then have like you would screw on like they would call it a QD mount. So you'd screw on a brake and then you would screw on a silencer of that. So I think some people feel like they get more for their silencer if they've got a brake on every gun and then they just add the silencer like off and on. I still feel like you get better accuracy when that silencer threads directly onto the barrel and shoulders right up against it. And then when you sight it in, it's always going to be the same. Originally, the QD mounts came out more for like a short barrel rifle because you have a lot of unburnt powder and you're going to get a lot more wear on it. So by having that brake, it can handle the blast and keep you from getting wear on your actual silencer. But there's a lot of people that like brakes. I mean, I try to talk people out of it, but because I feel like it drives up your cost, you're going to end up having to buy a brake for every gun. And kind of like you were saying, the mounts for scopes, it can add up. You can get a couple $100 in each of these mounts to be able to add them to each of your guns. And then you end up probably buying enough silencers to fit, the couple major guns you're using anyway. But, it's something to look into. Most brakes are becoming what we would call universal. Most of our silencers will take universal brakes, and the ones that don't, we're in the process of updating them so that they have universal threads, so that if you bought, say, brand X and you own their brakes, then you could buy ours or any others, and they would interchange. So it's coming to a standard now where most people are using universal brakes, where any manufacturer's brake that you put on there, typically you could put each silencer on it. So you could have one brand of brake, but then put different brands of silencers on them, which is nice. I always say it's the analogy of, if you bought a Motorola cell phone years ago, you had to keep buying the Motorola because you'd had the right plug and charger for it. So it's kind of the same concept of, if you got one brake, you typically want to stay with that brand, but now they're making it universal. So it's kind of like now where you have the USB-C or the iPhone one, so it doesn't force you to have to always buy the same brand.
Yeah, now you've confused me a bit. You're saying you have a brake on the end of your barrel and then you put the suppressor on it?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's not popular because I feel like the best accuracy, the best, sort of repeatability is going to be direct thread right onto the gun. But it does kind of have a cool wow factor in some people's minds to put the brake on there. I think in some people's minds, they feel like it's less turns. So if you screw the silencer on the barrel, then that's going to be, 20 turns. But if you have a brake that's got like coarser threads, it might be, 8 to 10 turns. So in their mind, they feel like, it's going to be a quick on, quick off. That's why I call it QD, quick to disconnect.
But if you've got a silencer that absorbs the gases and spreads it out over time and all the things that it does to make it quieter, if there's a break before you get to the suppressor, you no longer have the advantage of the suppressed sound, right?
Yeah, I mean, in some cases, the brake can slow the gas down. So when it gets into the chamber, maybe the chamber could be smaller. But the problem is you got the brake up inside the chamber now. Yeah, if I was an outsider looking in, I would say that the people that make the brakes like them because they're typically unique to their product and they can charge a premium for them. So if they get $200 for a brake that probably cost them $25 to make, they like that. So it's a way to increase the price of the silencer in my mind. But then again, some people like them. So you hate to talk people out of it if they like that.
So is the brake going inside of the suppressor?
Yeah, so the brake's on the outside.
That's why.
Yeah, so it's like, think of take off the flash hider off your, AR, put your brake on, and then the silencer screws on to the actual brake. So the brake is going into that first sort of volume of space that's open. So again, it was originally created more for short barrel rifles because of the unburnt powder and just you didn't want so much wear on that first baffle in the silencer. So if you put a brake in there, it would absorb some of it. But now people are putting it in a little bit of everything.
Gosh, I don't know. I think we've got more information on silencers now than I ever dreamed was even out there. Is there anything that we didn't cover, Brandon? Anything that you think our listeners might want to know?
A lot of people ask about a gun trust. So, So Silencer Central does a gun trust free just because we feel like it's the right way to do it. So people ask, well, what's the benefit of a trust and should I do a gun trust? So the benefit of a trust is the silencer would transfer ownership from us, the dealer, to a trust. And then anyone that consumer or that buyer puts on the trust can use it. So my daughter is 18. And so if she wanted to go prairie dog hunting in Western South Dakota and I couldn't go, I could, if my silencer was in my trust, I could put her name on the trust as a co-trustee. And there's no paperwork with ATF. You don't have to send ATF any information about her. There's no background check on my daughter. They don't know she's using it. Essentially, I would put her as almost kind of a co-owner as a trust. And then because the trust owns it, she could take it and go out hunting with it. So that's a benefit to some people. The other benefit is I could put my daughters to inherit the suppressor when I die, and then there's no paperwork. So once I'm gone, suppressor is still owned by the trust. They are the, sort of the successor trustees, so they get it when I die, and then there's no paperwork. But if you buy a suppressor as an individual, there is a burden on your spouse to do paperwork once you pass away to transfer it to someone else, which I find that most spouses aren't interested in doing when they're, typically in their 80s or whatever. They call and say, how do I get rid of this thing my husband played with for all these years? I don't want it. And it just creates a hassle. It kind of creates a hassle.
Yeah, it sounds like one should go through the garbage of the deceased. You probably throw it away. You might find it there. Yeah, I can understand that. Gosh, I mean, most people inherit a room full of firearms they know almost nothing about, have no idea what they're worth. What do you do, Wow, well, that's great, Brandon. I really appreciate you joining us here and explaining all of this stuff. It is really quite fascinating, and there's a lot more to it than one would think. But what I really like is you do most of the nasty red tape paperwork stuff. You've got all the laws and regulations figured out so someone like me doesn't stumble into it and mess up. And then you even offer to thread someone's barrel. So if you've got an old rifle and you're getting tired of the muzzle blast and you wish you could put a suppressor on it, but it's not threaded, you will actually thread the end of that muzzle so that one can put it on. Just send it to you. You'll get it threaded and I'll put the brake or the suppressor on and you're ready to go. That's pretty simple. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So, I know you probably originally from South Dakota. So if you ever come out here, bring the rifles with you. We'll thread them for you and give them back to you the same day. So if you come visit us or whatever, we'll help you out.
Yeah. My wife back here is going, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. We'll probably see you this fall then. I guess that pretty much covers it. So, hey, all of our listeners out there, if you have any questions after this, I would recommend go through it again and make sure, because I think Brandon's pretty much covered everything. But if you do have questions, just write us here on the YouTube channel if you're seeing it there, or go to ronspomeroutdoors.com website, and you can ask us a question there, and we will get the answer for you guys and get back to you. And if I can't answer it, we'll just bother Brandon, get him on again, and let him answer it.
I'd love to help you, yeah.
All right. Brandon, I really want to thank you for joining us here and straightening everything out on this silencer suppressor business. It's a little bit more understandable now. So I guess we're going to see you probably this fall. We'll take you up on that offer. We'll bring some rifles over there. We'll do some hunting with you and have a good time.
Yeah, well, perfect, Ron. I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for thinking of us and appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Hey, that's it for now, folks. So thanks for joining us on Ron Spomer Outdoors Podcast, and thanks to Brandon Maddox of Silencer Central for helping us better understand the ins and outs of getting and owning a suppressor. We will see you next time. Hunt honest and shoot straight.